In this lesson, we are going to talk about the demand schedule, the supply schedule, and equilibrium with supply and demand curve. These topics will help us understand how prices and quantities are determined in the market. My co-reporters will also provide further explanations and examples to help you understand each concept better. Our learning outcomes: identify the basic elements of supply and demand, to learn how to graph the supply and demand schedule, and to learn about the equilibrium of supply and demand. This section lists the goals of the lesson to understand supply and demand, learn how to graph them, and study how equilibrium works in the market. Good day, everyone. Today, our report will focus on one of the most important concepts in economics: supply and demand. We will discuss how prices and quantities of goods are determined in a market through the interaction between buyers and sellers. In this lesson, we will also learn about the demand and supply schedules, how to graph them, and how equilibrium is achieved when supply and demand met. The demand schedule. Both common sense and careful scientific observation show that the amount of a commodity people buy depends on its price. This means that the number of products people buy is affected by how much the product costs. The price influences how much people are willing to purchase. The higher the price of an article, other things held constant, the fewer unit consumers are willing to buy. So when the price of something goes up, people tend to buy less of it because it becomes too expensive. The lower its market price, the more units of it are bought. So when the price goes down, more people buy the product since it becomes cheaper and more affordable. There exists a definite relationship between the market price of a good and the quantity demanded of that good. Other things held constant. This relationship between price and quantity bought is called the demand schedule or the demand curve. So this means there is a clear connection between the price of a product and how much consumers want to buy it. This connection stays true if other factors don't change. The relationship between price and the amount people buy is shown in a demand schedule or demand curve, which helps visualize how demand changes when prices change. Let's look at a simple example. Table 3 to 1 presents a hypothetical demand schedule for cornflakes. At each price, we can determine the quantity of cornflakes that consumers purchase. Demand schedule for cornflakes, price per boxes, and the quantity demanded to millions of boxes per year. So if ang price sa cornflakes kay $5, so ang quantity demanded niya kay 9 millions of boxes per year. If ang price sa cornflakes is $4, ang quantity demanded niya is 10 millions of boxes per year. If $3 per box, ang quantity demanded niya is 12 millions of boxes per year. If $2 sad, ang quantity demanded niya is 15 millions of boxes per year. And if $1 ang per box, ang quantity demanded niya kay 20 millions of boxes per year. An explanation for the table 3 to 1, the demand schedule relates quantity demanded to price. So at each market price, consumers will want to buy a certain quality of cornflakes. As the price of cornflakes falls, the quantity of cornflakes demanded will rise. So if ang price sa cornflakes muubos, ang quantity nga i-demand sa cornflakes kay mutaas. So at $5 per box, consumers will buy 9 million boxes per year. So, if $5 ang price per box, ang consumers mo buy siya og 9 million boxes per year. Then, at a lower price, more cornflakes are bought. Thus, at a price of $4, the quantity bought is 10 million boxes. So, if ang cornflakes $4, Ang quantity bought po niya is 10 million boxes. So at yet, at a lower price equal to $3, the quantity demanded is still greater at 12 million. So if ang price sa cornflakes kay $3 per box, ang quantity demanded niya is 12 million boxes per year. And if $2 per box, ang quantity demanded niya is 15 million of boxes per year. And if $1 per ang price per box, so ang quantity demanded niya is 20 million of boxes per year. So we can determine the quantity demanded at each listed price in table 3:1. So makita na ninyo sa table 3:1. In figure 3:2, a downward sloping demand curve relates quantity demanded to price. In the demand curve for cornflakes, price is measured on the vertical axis, while the quantity demanded is measured on the horizontal axis. So, vertical axis, muna siya ang price. Ang quantity demanded, kaya na siya sa horizontal axis. So, each pair of price and demanded numbers from table 3:1 is plotted as a point. So, and then, a smooth curve is passed to the points to give us a demand curve. So, muna siya, demand curve. Muna siya, nani siya, smooth curve. So, the negative slope of the demand curve illustrates the law of downward sloping. So, ang kana siya negative slope of the demand curve, kaya muna siya the law of downward sloping. This explains how the demand curve is drawn using data from the demand schedule. So the price is shown on the vertical axis, yes, and the quantity demanded is shown on the horizontal axis. So when the points from the table are connected, they form a downward sloping line called the demand curve. So ang tawag ana siyang downward sloping line, kanang mag-ana siya kay demand curve. So this downward slope means that as the price decreases, kung ang price kay mugamay, the quantity demanded increase, showing the law of demand. So ang law of demand kay as the price decreases, the quantity of demanded increases. Ayan siya, increases. Showing, may show na siya ang law of demand.
So good evening, sir, and good evening, everyone. So next, let's talk about the demand curve and the law of downward sloping demand. So first, what is demand curve? So the demand curve is a graphical representation that shows the relationship between the price of a good service and the quantity demanded by consumers within a given period. And it helps us understand how much consumers are willing and able to buy at different price levels. So a demand curve is a line or curve on a graph that shows the relationship between the price and quantity demanded of a product. So the horizontal axis or the x-axis shows how many units of a product people are willing to buy. In this example, the cornflakes. And the vertical axis or the y-axis shows the price of that product. So the key point here is the inverse or the opposite relationship between the price and the quantity demanded. So when the price increases, people buy less. And when the price decreases, people buy more. So the importance of the demand curve is, first, it helps business determine optimal pricing strategies. So nagtabang sa mga negosyante nga makabalo unsa ang sakto nga presyo sa ilang mga baligya. And second, it assists economists in understanding consumer behavior. So nagtabang sa mga ekonomista nga masabtan unsaon pagdesisyon sa mga konsumidor o sa mga mamalitay. And the third is it serves as a foundation for studying market equilibrium and price elasticity of demand. So, basihan sa pag-ila sa market balance ug sa pag-usab sa demand kung muusab sad ang presyo. So, why is it common sense? So, because it matches how people normally behave. If something becomes expensive, you tend to buy less of it or look for cheaper alternatives. So, if palitunon daw ka ng mo mahal, gamay ra ang imong mapalit ani or mas mangita ka og kanang mga palitonon nga mas barato kaysa atong nga mahal. And if something becomes cheaper, you tend to buy more because it's more affordable. And if mo barato ang palitonon, is daghan na imuhang mapalit kay tungod ma-afford naman nimo. And why is it economic theory? Because economists use this idea to predict and explain consumer behavior. It's a foundational rule in economics that helps show how price affects demand. And what does empirically tested and verified mean? So it means that economists have studied and measured this pattern in real life using the actual data, and it proves true for almost every product or service. Examples include the cornflakes, gasoline, college education, and illegal drugs. First is the cornflakes. So people buy more when the prices drops. So dagan jud ang pagkan sa mga tao kung us ang presyo sa cornflakes. And the gasoline, higher prices make people drive less. So if mumahal ang presyo sa gasolina, is gamay ra jud kayo ang mapalit. And the college education, when tuition fees rise, fewer students enroll. So kung saka or mahal ang tuition fee anang eskwelahan, gamay ra jud kayo ang maka-afford ng estudyante o gamay ra ang mapa-enroll na. And illegal drugs, even this follow the same rule, higher prices reduce consumption. So in short, the downward slope of the demand curve is proof that price and demand move in opposite directions, principle true for almost everything people buy. So the meaning of the law of downward sloping demand. So the law of downward sloping demand, also known simply as the law of demand, says that when the price of a good or service increases, people buy less of it. And when the price of a good or service decreases, people buy more of it. So this happens as long as other factors remain the same, meaning people's income, taste, and prices of other goods do not change. So economists summarize this as an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So ang sagot to, when price goes up, quantity goes down. And when price goes down, the quantity goes up. So why does this happen? And there are two main reasons. First is the substitution effect. So there are two reasons for downward slopes. First is the substitution effect. So when the price of a product falls, consumers may switch from more expensive substitute to this cheaper option. So for example, kung maubos ang presyo sa manok, mas daghan ang mupalit og manok kaysa sa baboy. So the second is the income effect. So when the price of something goes up, it feels like your purchasing power decreases and you can't afford to buy as much as before. For example, if the price of rice doubles, your money won't buy as many kilos as before, so you buy less. So in short, the law of downward sloping demand shows that price and demand move in opposite directions. When something gets cheaper, people buy more, and when it gets more expensive, they buy less. So ang market demand curve, makita ni siya kung i-add ang tanan nga ginapamalit sa mga tao sa lain-lain nga presyo. So does the market demand curve obey the law of downward sloping demand? Yes, it certainly does. Pananglitan, kung maubos ang presyo, mas daghan ang mamalit kay mas barato na. Ang uban nga tao nga wala na malit sa una, mamalit na karon tungod kay mas makasave sila o kapuli sila og lain nga produkto. So kung ubos ang presyo, ang mga tao nga tigpalit na daan, usahay mamalit pa o mamalit pa jud sila og mas daghan kay tungod ni barato na ang baligya. Pero kung musaka ang presyo, ang uban mo palit na lang og gamay o muundang na og pamalit. So here is the summary. So the demand curve shows how the price affects the quantity demanded, and the law of downward sloping demand explains why the curve slopes downward, because consumers buy more when prices are lower. And these concepts are essential in economics as they explain the fundamental behavior of consumers in the market. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my topic is all about forces behind the demand curve and shifts in demand. But let's start with the forces behind the demand curve. The demand curve shows how much consumers are willing to buy at different prices. But demand doesn't depend only on price. There are other factors or forces that influence it. Ang demand sa usa ka produkto sama sa bugas, gasolina, or even a cellphone nagdepende sa kita sa mga tawo, sa kadaghanon sa mga tawo, presyo sa mga produkto, o gusto o hilig sa mga tawo, o labaw sa tanan, espesyal nga mga hinungdan sama sa panahon. Let's explain each of them one by one. Let's start with the first one, the average income of consumers. Income is an important factor that affects in demand. When people's income increases, they tend to buy more goods even if prices stay the same. For example, automobile purchases rise sharply as income levels go up. So, the higher the income, the greater the demand of products. We have the second one, the size of the market. The size of the population affects the market demand. A larger population means higher demand for products. We have here an example. This is the difference between the daghan ug kanang population ng gamay ra. The California's 40 million people buy about 40 times more apples and cars than Rhode Island's 1 million people. So, dali ra kay masabtan nun, the bigger population, the higher total demand. The third one is the prices and availability of related goods influence the demand for a community. This slide explains that the prices and availability of related goods can affect how much people demand a product. When two goods can replace each other, that's called substitute goods. The demand changes depending on their prices. For example, when computers became cheaper, people stopped buying typewriters. Aside from facts or objective elements, people's choices are also affected by subjective elements called taste or preferences. These come from our culture, history, needs, and emotions. For example, craving certain foods or liking specific things can depend on what we're used to. Tradition and religion also affect our taste, like how eating beef is normal in the US but tabao in India, or how Kera jellyfish is loved in Japan but strange to Americans. So what people like or dislike depends on their culture and background, not just personal choices. Finally, we have the last one, special influences. Some special influences can affect the demand for certain goods. The demand for a product changes depending on location, climate, and local conditions. The demand for umbrellas is high in rainy Seattle, but low in sunny Phoenix. The demand for air conditioners rises in hot weather. The demand for automobiles is low in New York, where public transportation is plenty and parking is difficult. So, demand changes based on specific situations like weather and environment. We have shifts in demand. Demand can change even if the price stays the same. When factors other than price, like income or preferences, change, the whole demand curve moves. If demand increases, the curve shifts to the right. If it decreases, it shifts to the left. An increase in demand for automobiles is shown as a rightward shift, meaning more cars are bought at every price. When there are changes in factors other than goods own price which affect the quantity purchaser, we call these changes shifts in demand. Demand increases or decreases when the quantity demanded at each price increases or decreases.
So, good day everyone. Sorry na ako ikaw. So, my topic is all about the the supply curve or the supply schedule. So, the supply schedule shows how much of a product will be supplied at different price levels, indicating the conditions under which business produce and sell their products. So, the supply curve or the supply schedule basically shows how much of a product producers are willing to produce at different prices. It helps explain how businesses decide what and how much to produce. So, sa supply curve and supply schedule, ari na to makita if kanang unsay i-produce sa mga producers and kanang ug how much ang ilahang i-produce considering the factors. So these are the factors that affect the supply curve or the supply schedule. First is the production cost. So if cheaper ang pag-produce ana nga product, of course, increase ang supply or ang ilahang ma-produce nga mga products. However, if expensive gani siya, mo decrease siya ang supply. So that's how the production cost affects the supply schedule. Next is technology. So, better technology makes production easier, and of course, kung sayon ra siya, mas musaka ang supply. And next is government policy. Taxes, subsidies, or trade rules can encourage or discourage production. So, diba naman gite business tayo naman gibayaran nga taxes. So kanang if taas ang tax niya, gamay ra ang halin ato nga product, of course gamay ra sad na ang ma-produce kay malugi man sad ang business ana. And next is ang special influences. Things like weather, innovations, or expectations about future prices can also affect supply. So for example, ang kana siya nga product kay angayan ra siya sa sunny nga weather niya, mag-produce ka nagdaghan, so malugi jud tendency nga malugi mong business or dili mahalin. So kung gamay ra gani kung ang business ni mo is angayan siya og tag-init, sa tag-init ka magpa-supply og daghan. Nya if kanang tag-ulan, sa tag-ulan sad ka magpa-supply og daghan. Dili iangay nimo siya ba kung imo i-balance kung asa ba mas mo grow ang imong business. So, let's talk about the shift in supply. Kung any of the factors nga akong na-mention ganiha katong upat ka buok, mo to ang production cost, technology, government policy, and special influences, kung na gani ma-change ato nila upat, not just the production price of the product, the whole supply curve shifts. So, kung mo increase gani ang supply, producers can make and sell more at each price. However, if mo decrease, producers make and sell less at each. So, in short, when the production cost, technology, government policy, and special influences change, the amount of products or producers are willing to produce will also change. Thank you.
So, good day everyone. So, let's proceed to the equilibrium of supply and demand. So, we all know, no? So, kung makabati ito mo ingon og equilibrium, so, makatatak na dyan sa itong utok nga equilibrium means equal. So, atong ipangita dire kay ang equalities o atong i-discuss karon ang equality sa supply and demand. So, market equilibrium comes at a price which quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. So, basabot ani kung pila ang kung pila ra ang gidemand sa mga tao, maura pod ang i-supply sa mga producers. Kay equal man si equilibrium man, so dapat equal ra jud siya. So, sa equilibrium, so there is no tendency no nga mutaas or muubos ang iyang presyon. Neutral na dyan siya kay equilibrium man. So, another term sa equilibrium price is market clearing price. So, natay mga anang example diri nga pwede na tong kanang i-discuss o i-explain sa inyo ha sa market clearing price. So ari sa iyang possible price per box kay 5. So ang iyang demand mahal-mahal man, so ang demand sa mga tao gamay ra. So pag abot sa supply, gamay ra ang demand, daghan ang supply, so una-unsa man siya. So nanubra. So unsa may tawag ani? Surplus. So kay daghan man ang supply, so ang pressure sa iyang price ubos ra jud kay dili daghan man og supply. Gawa ka pre ra gud kung kung gamay ra, di ba, if na magsakit-sakit ang baboy, so gamay na lang ang mga baboy nga nabilin, so ilaha dayong pamahalan ang presyo kay gamay ra man ang supply. So diri daghan man kay supply, so dili ra sila ma-pressure sa pagpataas sa presyo. So mao ni siya nga iyang presyo diri ubos ra ay daghan man ang supply. So sa ikaduha, ang iyang possible price kay 4 per boxes, then pag sa iyang quality demanded kay 10 per boxes per year iyang gi-demand. Possible ni siya nga iyang i-demand. Dahil pag-abot sa iyang supply kay 16. So kuan gyapon ni sakar daghan gyapon ang supply, so unsa man siya surplus. So kay taas daghan ra man ang supply, so ang iyang pressure sa iyang price dili ra gyapon mo taas. So ari ang sunod kay ang iyang possible price per box kay 3, ang iyang gidemand kay 12. So mo na ni siya gitawag og equilibrium, kaning both kanang both supply and demand kay kaparihara. Ayang demand 12 boxes per year, so ang gi-supply 12 boxes ra gyapon. So mao na siya equilibrium. So equal na jud siya. So ang iyang price neutral ra pod kay sakto raman ang equal raman ang iyahang gi-supply og ang iyahang og ang demand sa mga consumers. So pag abot na po diri, ubos na jud kayo ang presyo, nidaghan na sad ang demand. So ang supply na poy nihinay. So unsa may kanang tawag ana if supply mas daghan ang demand kaysa sa supply. So na short na pod. So kay as what I've said kanina, kung gamay ra ang supply niya, taas ang demand, so mahal. Kay gamay ra man ang iyang supply. So ang iyang pressure on prices mo mahal, so mo upward mo taas kay tungod gamay ra ang supply sa producers. So maura na siya no, so equilibrium price. So mo na siya ang presyo sa mga goods or services, ang equal price sa mga goods or services. Then ang equilibrium quantity kay equal amount sa quantity or goods or services nga supplied are equal for a certain price level. So mao ni siya, so price mao ni siya mao ni siya ang presyo sa goods or atong bayran if mo paleta. So ari na ta sa quantity demanded. So quantity demanded masabtan naman siya no. So mao ni siya ang total number of units sa goods or services sa consumers nga ilang willing nilang paliton or i-purchase at a given price niya. Ang quantity supplied kay maupod ni siya ang total of units nga i-produce pod sa mga producers sa consumer nga ni demand at a given price pod. So shortage may bawaan masabtan naman ng shortage, taas ang demand, then taas ang demand, gamay ra ang supply. So muna siya shortage. Surplus food daghan ang supply, gamay ra ang demand, ang shortage, barato ang presyo, daghan ang demand. So, gamay ra ang supply. So, mo na siya shortage. Ang surplus pod, daghan mahal ang presyo, so gamay ra ang demand, so nagsobra-sobra pod ang supply. So, that's all, no. I hope inyo harang nasabtan, and sa mga wa nakasabot, pwede ra jud mo PM sa kuha para mausa-usa ta mong bigwas. Sige, joke lang. Sige. Thank you and God bless you all.
Good evening, classmates, and especially to you, sir. I am Eden Keith B. Pipito, and I am going to discuss all about rationing by prices. But first is ato sang sabton kung unsa na ang rationing. When we say rationing, it means dividing or controlling the limited goods or resources. So in economics, may tabo ni ang rationing when the goods or the resources are limited. So mao nang when we say rationing by prices, it refers to how the market decides on who gets what, the goods or the resources based on prices. Pero ato ni siyang masabtan later on sa atong discussion. Okay, now, ato sang basahon ang nasa PPT. Rationing by prices. Let's now take stock of what the market mechanism accomplishes. By determining the equilibrium prices and quantities, the market allocates or rations out the scarce goods of the society among the possible uses. Okay. Last week, we discussed about the market mechanism, where this is where the supply and demand interacts to set prices and distribute resources. So, when the through the interaction of the supply and demand, mahitabo ang equilibrium prices. Equilibrium prices means quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. So, mao tong mahitabo ang equilibrium price. And through equilibrium price, siya ang mo-decides how limited or scarce resources are distributed among people and industries. So, mao na siya ibot pasabot ani nga paragraph. Now, who does the rationing? A planning board? Congress? The president? No. The marketplace. Kung saon? Through the interaction of the supply and demand. So, ang marketplace, siya ang mubuhat aning rationing through the interaction of supply and demand. So, it is often called as rationing by the purse. Why? When we say purse, di ba purse kanang Marshall sulanan sa Marta, anak, something. So, when we say rationing by the purse, it means that the money or the purchasing power of a person maga-determines kung kinsa ang makapalit ana nga certain goods. So, muna siya buot pasabot anang rationing by the purse. Now, what goods are produced? Unsa nga mga goods ang i-produce? This is answered by the signals of market prices. High corn prices stimulate corn production, whereas falling computer prices stimulate a growing demand for computation. Those who have the most dollar votes have the greatest influence on what goods are produced. Buot pasabot ani, kani ang what goods are produced, this is answered by the signals of market prices. Why? Prices act as signals between consumers and producers. Ngano man? Kay through prices, through sa presyo sa usa ka goods, maga-communicate dira on what consumers want and what producers should make. For instance, if the price based sa kato example sa PPT, if the price of the corn, mga mais, kay musaka, so ang farmers ma-encourage sila nga mo produce og daghan pa. Kay tungod since nisaka man ang presyo, so daghan sila og makita. While if ang presyo sa computer kay mo paubos, muhay ang demand nga mamalit ang computer. So the producers are encouraged they are encouraged to produce more computers. So muna siya both pasabot that prices act as signals. Kung asa higher ang demand sa mga tao, dira mo respond ang mga producers. Those who have the most dollar votes have the greatest influence on what goods are produced. Meaning aning dollar votes kay these are the people ng mga dagkog income, mga dato. So when we say they have the greatest influence on what producers should make, kay tungod since dagko man sila income, so mas ang ilang kasagaran paliton kay mga branded products, mga high qualities, mga mamahalon ng mga produkto. And through buying that branded products, ang kumpanya kadali ra pud kayo makakita. So mao nang those who have the most dollar votes, sila ang mas dako og influence sa usa ka kumpanya. Kay tungod sa ilang pagpamalit og mga branded products, mas daling maka-profit ang usa ka kumpanya. Now, for whom are goods produced? The power of the purse dictates the distribution of income and consumption. Those with higher incomes end up with larger houses, fancier cars, and longer vacations. When backed up by cash, the most urgently felt needs get fulfilled through the demand curve. Pasabot ani, the power of the purse dictates the distribution of income and consumption. Meaning aning the power of the purse, as I've said earlier, ang purse means katunang mga tao nga daghang kwarta, daghang income, daghan kay sila mapalit, something ana. So the power of the purse means the ability to pay. Makabayad ka og basig ang mamahalon ng mga butang. So ang pasabot ani that the power of the purse kay makadetermine on who can buy or who can access that goods. For instance, based aning sa example, people with higher incomes can afford larger houses, mga lindot nga mga sakinan, makaadtog vacation bisig asa nga lugar. Kay tungod dagko man sila kwarta, dagko man sila income, daghan sila kwarta, and maka-purchase sila bisig unsyan, mamahalon usdi. Meanwhile, ang katong mga tao with lower incomes can only buy on what fits within their budget. So mo na pasabot sa the power of the purse, the power of money, where if you have the money to pay, then you can buy any product you want. So mo na siya pasabot sa power of the purse. So that is why rationing by prices is also called as rationing by the purse, because ang tao nga daghan og kwarta, makabay sila og mga daghan mga goods og mga high quality nga products. So more example aron mas masabtan pa kung sa kinang rationing by prices. For instance, if there's a shortage sa humay, instead nga ipabaligya ni sa government equally ning taas noon ang presyo sa humay kay tungod sa higher demand sa mga tao. So, those people who have lots of money, dahag kwarta, dagkog income, makapalit siya gihapon sila atong humay nga ni taas. Makapalit gihapon sila kay tungod daghan man sila kwarta. While those people with lower income kay either mopalit sila atong humay pero gamay rag kilo, or mobalhin sila sa mas barato pa nga alternative. So through aning price adjustment, nahitabo ang interaction sa supply o sa demand, which is katong sa equilibrium price, no? So mo na through the interaction of the supply and demand, it shows how the market rations through prices. Giunsa pag-ration out ang market based sa mga presyo sa goods. Ug mao ra to tanan. Salamat.